He left me two things when he died, a gold watch that doesn't tick anymore, and a warning I refuse to hear. Don't hold on too tight, Nora. Even love needs space to breathe. At the time, I thought he was talking about grief. Now I know, he was talking about our son. You ever hold on to someone so hard, thinking if you just love them enough, they'll never leave? That was me. And that love, that desperate, trembling love, became the very thing that pushed him away. After Martin passed, silence moved into our house. The kind of silence that hums in the walls and echoes through the hallways. So I filled it the only way I knew how, with Dylan. He was 26, tall like his father, with that same habit of cracking his knuckles when he was nervous. I saw Martin every time Dylan smiled. Maybe that's why I clung to him like air. The Wickfield house was more than bricks to me. It was history. Martin built that porch with his own hands. We planted a maple tree out front when Dylan was born. He used to climb it, muddy shoes and all, and shout, "Look, Mom. I can see the whole world from here." Now that same tree stood still, heavy with age, just like me. I told myself I was protecting Dylan. That's what mothers do, right? But deep down, I wasn't protecting him. I was protecting myself from losing another person I loved. Sometimes I'd knock on his door just to ask if he'd eaten, knowing he was busy working on his laptop. Sometimes I'd sit on his bed after he left for work, straightening his pillows, folding his hoodie, just to feel close. Maybe that sounds strange. But when you've lost your partner, your child becomes your heartbeat. And I couldn't risk mine stopping again. I still remember the first time he told me he wanted to move out. It wasn't cruel, just casual. "Mom, I've been thinking of finding my own place. Closer to the city." He said it while checking his phone, like it was nothing. But to me, it was everything. I laughed it off, pretending to be fine. "Sure, honey. Just make sure you can afford the rent." But when he left that night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair across from me. Martin's chair. And I whispered to myself, I already know how this story ends. Still, I kept smiling, cooking his favorite meals, waiting for him to change his mind. People say grief fades, it doesn't. It just finds new shapes to hide behind. The truth? I didn't just lose my husband that day in the hospital. I started losing my son too, slowly, quietly, like sand slipping through my hands. And I had no idea how much tighter I was about to hold on. Because soon, something would happen, something I couldn't take back. But before we get there, let me ask you something. If your child started pulling away, would you let them go? Or would you fight for them, even if it meant losing yourself? Tell me in the comments, what would you do? Every morning started the same way. Coffee brewing, sunlight hitting the kitchen window, and me checking my phone, waiting for Dylan's good morning text. Some days it came. Some days it didn't. And those days felt heavier than most. I kept our world small, just the two of us. Sunday dinners, laundry days, late-night movies. He didn't ask for any of it. But I believed a good mother keeps showing up even when she's not invited. I'd call him during lunch breaks. "Hey, just checking if you ate." Sometimes he'd answer, sometimes he'd send a text hours later, "Busy, Mom. Talk later." Those two words, "talk later," became my new silence. He had friends, a good job, his own dreams. But none of them included me. And I couldn't understand why love suddenly felt like intrusion. One evening, I made his favorite casserole, the one with the crispy cheese crust he used to beg for as a boy. He texted last minute, "Sorry, can't make dinner tonight. Work event." I told myself not to take it personally. But that night, while scrolling through my phone, I saw something that made my heart stop. There he was, in a photo someone tagged him in. Not at work. At a rooftop bar downtown. Laughing with friends. And next to him, a woman. She wasn't just pretty, she looked comfortable. Her hand on his shoulder, his face lit up like I hadn't seen in years. I stared at that picture until the screen dimmed. Maybe you've had that moment, when your heart tells you something before your mind is ready to admit it. That night, I didn't sleep. I told myself I was overreacting, that he deserved a life. But another part of me whispered, he's slipping away. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I texted, "How was your work event?" He replied, "Good. Long night. Tired." He lied. It wasn't just a lie that hurt, it was how easily it came. Like honesty was now something he only shared with her. I started noticing small changes after that. He stayed out later. His tone got shorter. His smile faded quicker. And the worst part? He looked happier when he wasn't home. I'd watch the clock, waiting for him to walk in, rehearsing conversations in my head that never happened. The space between us grew like an invisible wall, one I built with good intentions and fear. One evening, he finally said it. "Mom, I need you to stop worrying so much." "I'm fine." But his eyes, they weren't angry. They were tired. Tired of being the center of my world. That night, I sat on the couch holding my phone, scrolling back through old photos, birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. Every smile told the same story, we used to be everything to each other. And now? Now I was becoming a guest in his life. Tell me, have you ever realized too late that love can turn into a cage? Would you loosen your grip, or hold on even tighter? The first time I met Alana Pierce, she wore white. Not wedding white, more like confidence white. Clean, sharp, the kind that makes you feel like you showed up overdressed for your own home. Dylan brought her by one Sunday afternoon, without warning. I was in my housecoat, hair pinned back, a casserole cooling on the counter. He just walked in with her and said, "Mom, this is Alana." Her smile was polite, not warm, not cold. Just careful. And right then, I felt something inside me freeze. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Whitfield," she said, extending her hand. Her nails were perfect. Her perfume smelled like citrus and money. "Nora, please," I said. "Mrs. Whitfield makes me sound old." She smiled again, that same polite, measured smile. "I like to be respectful," she said. Respectful. That word stuck with me, because I could already tell she didn't mean it the way I understood it. I'd spent my whole life believing people show love by closeness. By showing up. By being involved. But Alana, she had boundaries. Lines I wasn't supposed to cross. I didn't realize it yet, but that day was the beginning of losing my son for good. I wanted her to like me, of course. So, I did what any mother would, I baked cookies. Warm chocolate chip, just the way Dylan liked them. When I brought them out, she smiled again, politely. "Oh, thank you, but I don't eat sweets," she said, lifting her hand as if they might burn her. "I'm on a diet." A diet. I laughed it off, but the way she said it, like my cookies were something shameful, it stung more than I expected. Dylan, bless him, tried to smooth it over. "Mom's cookies are legendary," he said, taking one. But she didn't even pretend to taste them. I told myself I was imagining things. But as the afternoon went on, every word she spoke felt like she was claiming ground, territory that used to belong to me. She talked about work, travel, fitness, the kind of life I knew nothing about. I nodded, smiled, asked questions. She answered them all with the same gentle wall in her tone. Like she was being kind enough to let me exist, but only at arm's length. When they left, I watched from the porch as they walked to his car. Dylan carried her bag. She slipped her hand into his. And he didn't look back. For the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own story. That night, I called my friend Marla and said, I met her. The girl he's been seeing. Oh, really? How was she? I hesitated. Perfect. And the silence on the other end said everything. Because perfect people scare mothers like me. After that day, everything changed in small ways first. He called less, texted slower. Our dinners got postponed more often. I told myself it was normal, he's building a life, I said. But deep down, I felt something darker creeping in. You ever meet someone and just know they'll take something from you, even if they don't mean to? That was Alana. Every word she said, every glance, felt like a thread being pulled, unraveling the quiet little world Dylan and I had built. And here's the truth I couldn't say out loud, I didn't hate her. I feared her. Because for the first time since Martin died, my son had found someone else to fill the silence. And I didn't know how to live without being needed. Tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone who changed everything in your family, even if they didn't mean to? Would you trust them, or try to protect what's yours? They say when walls start to crack, it's not the earthquake that brings them down, it's what was already weak inside. I guess that's true for families, too. After Alana came into our lives, the air shifted. Dylan still came by, but his visits felt shorter, like he was checking off an obligation. I'd cook his favorites, he'd compliment them politely, then check his phone. Once, I asked him, "How's work been, honey?" He said, "Good. Just good." Before Alana, that answer would have been a 10-minute story about his boss or some new project. Now, it was one word, enough to keep me quiet. I started to realize we weren't having conversations anymore. We were having summaries. One night, I tried to bridge the gap. I said, "You used to tell me everything." He looked at me, kind, but distant. "Mom, I still do. Just, not everything needs to be shared." That sentence cut deeper than he knew. I smiled, pretending I understood. But inside, I felt like someone had closed a door I didn't even know existed. Later that week, I invited them both for dinner again. This time, Alana offered to help set the table. For a moment, I thought maybe we were turning a corner. But then I overheard her in the hallway, whispering into her phone, "I love him, but I can't marry a man whose mother lives through him." The words hit like a blow to the chest. I stood frozen, holding 2 plates. The world tilted, and the sound of the clock ticking felt deafening. She didn't know I was there. I didn't move. I couldn't. It wasn't just what she said, it was how true it sounded. I'd become so wrapped up in being Dylan's mother that I forgot to be Nora. That night, dinner was quiet. I smiled through the pain, laughing when I was supposed to, nodding at stories I barely heard. But inside, I was screaming. When they left, I went to the porch again. Same spot. Same silence. The wind carried her words back to me, lives through him. And for the first time, I wondered if she was right. It's strange, the person you love most can become your reflection, and one day you look up and realize you've disappeared behind their life. I tried to sleep that night but kept replaying every moment, every casserole, every text, every time I showed up uninvited, thinking love meant more. Maybe love sometimes means less. But I wasn't ready to believe that yet. Not then. Because the cracks in the foundation, they were showing. And I was still trying to patch them with memories. If you've ever felt replaced by someone new in your child's life, tell me, how did you handle it? Did you step back, or hold on even tighter? It was supposed to be just dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, quiet conversation, my way of making peace. But peace never comes when hearts are already cracked. I'd spent the whole afternoon cooking. I wanted everything perfect, not because I thought food could fix what was broken, but because trying made me feel less helpless. The table looked beautiful. Candles. Flowers. My best china. When Dylan and Alana walked in, I smiled like nothing had ever happened. Smells amazing, Mom, he said. And for a brief second, I believed we could go back. But then Alana's eyes met mine, calm, distant. And I remembered her words, I can't marry a man whose mother lives through him. Dinner started quiet. Forks. Plates. Small talk. Then, somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the silence, the truth came out. I don't even know who spoke first, maybe it was me. Maybe I couldn't stand pretending anymore. I heard what you said, Alana. Her fork froze midair. What do you mean? In the hallway. That night. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. You said you couldn't marry a man whose mother lives through him. The air went heavy. Dylan's face drained of color. Alana took a slow breath. You were listening to my private conversation? I live in this house, I said, standing up. If something's said under my roof, I hear it. Dylan's eyes filled with something I'd never seen before, disappointment. Mom, that's not okay, he said softly. I wasn't spying, I was cleaning the table. I said, my voice breaking. You think I wanted to hear that? Alana set her fork down. Nora, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just meant that Dylan and I. That you want him to choose, I snapped. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't deny it. And that silence, that tiny, quiet silence, was the loudest thing in the room. I turned to Dylan. She's making you choose. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. No, Mom, she's not. This isn't about choosing sides. It's about boundaries. Boundaries? I laughed bitterly. I raised you alone. I was there when you broke your arm, when you lost your first job, when you cried over that girl in college. Mom, please stop, he said, standing now too. This isn't fair. The words kept coming, wild, desperate, like water bursting through a dam. I gave you everything, Dylan. Every piece of me. And now I'm supposed to just disappear because she says so? Alana's eyes softened. Nora, no one is asking you to disappear. We just want space to build our own life. Her calm made me angrier. How can you say that like I'm the problem? I whispered. You don't even know what it's like to lose someone and then have the only person you have left. Dylan's voice cut through me. Mom, stop making this about Dad. Silence. Just like that, the knife slipped in. My throat tightened. Don't you dare bring your father into this. But it was too late. The room had already turned cold. He exhaled, defeated. I can't keep doing this. I can't make you happy and build a future at the same time. And then he said the words I'll never forget, I love you, Mom. But I love her too. He grabbed his jacket. Alana stood, hesitant, as if waiting for me to say something that might change his mind. But I didn't. Because sometimes heartbreak doesn't explode, it just sinks, quietly, into your chest until you can't breathe. The front door closed. Their car pulled out of the driveway. And I stood there, staring at 2 half-empty plates, still warm. I sat down slowly and reached for Martin's photo on the sideboard. His smile, steady, kind, stared back at me. I'm sorry, I whispered. I tried to hold on. The candles flickered out. The clock ticked louder. And in that still, suffocating silence, I finally understood what Martin had meant before he died. Don't hold on too tight, Nora. Even love needs space to breathe. But by the time I understood, it was already too late. I didn't know it then, but that night, I lost more than my temper, I lost my son. If you were in my shoes, would you have said nothing, or fought to be heard? It's strange how silence has a sound. You don't notice it until it becomes all you hear. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since the argument. No calls. No visits. No messages. The house was spotless, but empty. Every night, I cooked dinner for two, roast chicken, pasta, sometimes stew. I set 2 plates. Ate from one. The other stayed untouched, cooling slowly, like hope fading. I told myself he was busy. Work. Life. But deep down, I knew. He wasn't coming. I left him voicemails. "Hey, it's Mom. Just checking in. Then, Dylan, I made your favorite tonight. Then, I'm sorry if I said too much. I didn't mean to push you away." Each one sounded weaker than the last. Sometimes, late at night, I'd scroll through his social media. He looked happy. There he was, smiling at some dinner, Alana's hand on his arm, her friends in the background. I didn't recognize a single face. You ever see your child living a life that doesn't have room for you anymore? It's like watching a movie where your part's been cut out. The neighbors still waved, the mail still came, the days still passed, but it all felt wrong. I'd built my life around being someone's mother. And now, without him, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. So I started writing. Letters. Every day. "Dear Dylan, I know you're mad at me, but I just want to talk. I miss your voice. Dear Dylan, you don't have to choose between me and her. I just need to know you're okay. Dear Dylan, I'll try to be better. I promise. Just don't stay gone too long." I wrote dozens of them, some on napkins, others on lined paper. But I never sent them. I was too afraid he'd see my words as guilt instead of love. Until one night, I did. I picked one that felt simple. Safe. "Dear Dylan, I miss you. Please come home. Love, Mom." I mailed it. And waited. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Finally, the envelope came back, sealed, crisp, and stamped in red, "Return to sender." My knees gave out on the porch. The world blurred around me. He'd moved. Without telling me. That night, I sat at the dinner table again. 2 plates. One untouched. The phone stayed silent. The walls, the ticking clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, they were my only witnesses. I thought about Martin again. About the way he used to tell me, "You can't love someone into staying, Nora." I didn't understand it back then. I do now. Because sometimes love isn't a gift. It's a chain, and I'd been holding it too tight. Still, I whispered into the empty room, "I love you, Dylan. Always." If you've ever lost someone without a goodbye, you know that kind of silence never really ends. Tell me in the comments, would you wait for your child to come back, or would you try to? You can feel when something shifts even before anyone says it out loud. The air changes first. The small talk becomes shorter. The silences, longer. It started one ordinary afternoon. I was pruning the hydrangeas when my neighbor, Mrs. Grady, leaned over the fence with her usual gossip smile. "Haven't seen your boy around lately," she said. "Saw him with that lovely girl, though. What's her name? Alana?" They looked like a married couple already. I laughed it off. "Married? Oh no, they're just dating." She shrugged. Could have fooled me. They looked so settled. That word, settled, stayed stuck in my chest long after she walked away. That night, I sat in bed scrolling through Dylan's social media. Every photo told half a story. Him at dinner. Her smile in the corner. A caption that read, "Starting something new." Starting what, exactly? I clicked on every tag, every like, every comment. That's when I noticed it, a small account tagged in one of Alana's photos at Planned by Grace. The profile picture showed a woman standing under a floral arch, bouquet in hand. My pulse quickened. A wedding planner. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe Alana's friend just posted about work. But the thought gnawed at me. Have you ever felt your instincts warning you before your mind can make sense of it? It's like your heart already knows what's about to hurt it. Every night after that, I checked his profile again. Sometimes he posted stories, a blurry dinner table, a sunset over water, a woman's laughter caught off camera. And sometimes nothing for days. It became a routine. Wake up. Coffee. Scroll. Lunch. Dishes. Scroll. Dinner for two. One plate cold. Scroll again. Each time, I told myself, you're just being dramatic, Nora. He'll come around. He's still your boy. But deep down, something didn't feel right. He looked different. Not just older, but gone. Then one night, while staring at another smiling photo of the two of them, I whispered, "Are you hiding something from me, Dylan?" The house creaked in response, that eerie kind of silence that makes you feel small. I thought about calling him. But I didn't. Because if he answered, he'd hear the fear in my voice. And if he didn't answer, I'd have to face the truth that I wasn't part of his world anymore. Still, I couldn't stop. The more I scrolled, the more I saw patterns, names I didn't recognize, events I wasn't invited to, smiles I'd never seen in person. And then, one night, I saw a post from that same wedding planner account. A simple photo of lace fabric laid out on a table. The caption read, "Counting down the days for a love that feels like home." My heart skipped. The comments were filled with heart emojis and one familiar username at Dylan Pierce. He'd liked the post. I froze. Counting down the days. A love that feels like home. What days? What love? For a moment, I thought about driving to his apartment. Just showing up, unannounced, like I used to when he was a teenager sneaking out. But this wasn't a teenage secret. This was something else. And deep down, I already knew the truth, I just didn't want to believe it. A mother always knows when her child is building a life she's no longer part of. Still, I kept telling myself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just work. Maybe it's an engagement shoot for someone else. Maybe. But the human heart doesn't run on logic. It runs on fear, hope, and denial, all tangled together like a knot you can't untie. So I kept watching. Kept scrolling. Kept praying that whatever he was hiding, I'd be ready for it. I wasn't. Tell me, if you were me, would you have stopped digging? Or would you keep looking, even if the truth might destroy you? It was a Saturday morning. The kind where the sunlight sneaks through the blinds and paints soft lines on the kitchen floor. I was pouring my tea, the same ritual I'd done every morning since Martin passed. The phone buzzed on the counter. A notification. Instagram. I wasn't expecting anything, maybe a recipe video or an ad. But when I opened the app, my heart dropped. There he was. Dylan. In a white suit. Alana beside him, radiant, calm, her lace gown glowing under a floral arch. The caption read, "Forever starts here." I froze. At first, I thought it was some kind of photo shoot. Maybe an engagement announcement. But then I saw the comments. "Congratulations, you too. The most beautiful ceremony. Wishing you endless love." My hand trembled. The teacup slipped from my fingers, hitting the tile. It didn't shatter, it just rolled and settled on its side, spilling slowly across the floor. The room blurred. I scrolled again. More photos. The ceremony. The kiss. Alana's parents smiling beside them. Dylan, my son, holding a glass, laughing, dancing. Her friends, their friends, everyone, except me. There was even a photo of the reception table. And in the middle row, a single empty chair with a place card that read, "Reserved." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Because that chair, that space, was where I should have been. Not invited. Not told. Not even considered. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stop the sob from escaping. The more I scrolled, the worse it got. Alana's family smiling. Her father walking her down the aisle. Her mother fixing her veil. All the moments I'd dreamed of sharing with Dylan, they were someone else's now. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head. Was it her idea? Was it his? Did he think I'd ruin it? Did I push him so far away that he couldn't even face me? I wanted to hate them both, but all I could feel was this hollow ache in my chest. I looked around my kitchen. The same table where I'd fed him, where he'd done his homework, where we'd planned his first road trip. Every corner of that room had a memory of us. And now, those memories felt like they belonged to a stranger. I don't remember how long I stood there, scrolling through every image like a punishment. I just remember the last photo, the one that broke me completely. It was of Dylan holding Alana's hands, looking at her the way his father once looked at me. Behind them, sunlight streamed through the trees. And off to the side, in the corner of the frame, was that same empty chair. I whispered, "You saved me a seat, but you never wanted me there." My breath shortened. My chest felt tight. And for a second, I thought I might faint. I sat down, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. Tears blurred the phone screen. The world around me went quiet, like the house was holding its breath with me. And in that silence, I felt something inside me shift. Something heavy. Something final. It wasn't anger. Not really. It was heartbreak. The kind that doesn't scream, it just breaks quietly, in layers, until you can't recognize yourself anymore. I wish I could say I threw the phone, screamed, or cursed. But I didn't. I just sat there. Still. Numb. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "You're not his home anymore, Nora." That hurt more than anything. Because home wasn't supposed to be a place, it was supposed to be me. In that moment, something inside me snapped, not out of hate, but heartbreak. Have you ever seen something online that changed the way you saw someone forever? Would you forgive them, or would you walk away to protect what's left of your heart? Move on, even if it broke you? Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just goes quiet, like a room that's forgotten how to echo. That's what the house felt like after I saw those wedding photos. Silent. Still. Unforgiving. For 3 days, I didn't leave my bed. I didn't answer calls. Didn't eat. Didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling and thought about every moment I'd spent trying to hold a love that no longer wanted to be held. By the 4th morning, I got up. Not because I felt better, but because the silence was starting to sound like madness. I walked through every room of that old Whitfield home, barefoot, the floorboards cool beneath my feet. The air carried a faint smell of cinnamon, the kind that always lingered after Dylan's favorite breakfast. His laughter still lived here. His footprints, his fingerprints, invisible but everywhere. There was the wall where we marked his height every birthday, little pencil lines climbing higher and higher until the last one stopped just below Martin's shoulder mark. I ran my fingers over it. The graphite had faded, but I could still feel the ridges where the pencil dug too deep. Then the hallway, the one lined with framed photos. Dylan's first day of kindergarten. His high school graduation. That trip to the lake where he'd caught his first fish and screamed with pride. Every picture whispered, "You were here. You mattered once." And yet, in his new world, I was nowhere. I stopped in front of Martin's photo on the mantel, that same one I'd clutched the night Dylan left. He looked steady, calm, like always. The kind of man who never raised his voice, who could silence a storm just by speaking gently. "Martin," I whispered, "what would you do if he forgot you like this?" The photo didn't answer. But in that quiet moment, I heard his voice in my memory, "Don't hold on too tight, Nora. Even love needs space to breathe." I exhaled a trembling breath. "I tried giving him space," I said. "And he used it to disappear." That's when it hit me, this wasn't my home anymore. Not really. It was a museum of who we used to be. And maybe it was time to let go. The decision came suddenly, not as anger, but as clarity. If I meant so little in his new world, then my love no longer belonged here. I picked up the phone, dialed a number from a card I'd seen in the mail months ago, Crescent Realty. A young woman answered. "Crescent Realty, this is Mia." My voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Yes. I'd like to sell my house." There was a pause. "Of course. Can I have the address?" I gave it. Calmly. Like I wasn't uprooting my entire life in one sentence. By noon, she was standing in my living room, clipboard in hand, her shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She was young, maybe around Dylan's age, with polite eyes that didn't pry. "It's a beautiful property," she said, glancing around. "You've taken such good care of it." I smiled faintly. "Yes. I tried." She took photos of every room, the kitchen where Dylan learned to cook, the porch where Martin used to read the paper, the yard where we'd planted that oak tree when Dylan turned 10. Each camera click sounded like a goodbye. When she left, she promised to send the paperwork that same evening. And she did. I didn't hesitate. Didn't sleep on it. Didn't call anyone for advice. I just sat at the kitchen table with a pen in hand, staring at the dotted line. My hand shook. Not from doubt, but from the weight of memory. I signed it. Right there, with the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence and the sun sliding down the kitchen tiles, I ended a chapter of my life that had defined me for decades. It was almost frightening, how quiet it felt afterward. No thunder. No tears. Just peace, in a cruel kind of way. That night, I walked the house one last time. Room by room. Memory by memory. In the living room, I found one of Dylan's old baseball gloves tucked behind a box. I held it for a long time, tracing the worn leather. It still smelled faintly of dust and summer. In his bedroom, the posters were gone, but the indentation of his old bed frame still marked the carpet. I could almost see him there, sprawled out, pretending to study, humming to music. I smiled through tears. "You were my whole world, you know that?" I whispered. My reflection in the dark window looked older than I remembered. Lonelier too. I went back to the kitchen and sat down. The house felt like it was breathing slower, like it knew I was leaving. That's when I took out the envelope. I'd written it earlier that evening, plain white, my handwriting steady and simple. No return address. No signature. Just his name on the front, Dylan. Inside, a single letter. Short. Barely a page. It read, "You are loved far beyond your understanding. I let go not because I stopped loving you, but because I finally learned that love isn't meant to be held hostage. May this home become someone else's beginning. Mom." I left it on the kitchen counter, beside a half-burned candle and Martin's old keychain. A small piece of me in every object. Then I walked to the front door. For a moment, I hesitated, hand on the knob, eyes closed. I thought about turning back. About taking one last photo, one last keepsake. But then I remembered his wedding photo, that empty chair. No, I thought. I've already said my goodbye. I stepped outside. The air was cool, the streetlight flickering faintly across the driveway. I locked the door and slid the key through the mail slot. It landed with a soft clink on the hardwood. And just like that, the house was no longer mine. I didn't cry. I just stood there for a while, staring at the front porch until the night swallowed it whole. Somewhere deep in the shadows, a dog barked, and the wind rustled the trees we'd planted years ago. That's when I whispered, "Goodbye, my boys." Then I turned and walked away, no destination, no plan, just a quiet rage that had finally run out of things to burn. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew one thing for sure: I was done waiting for calls that would never come. Have you ever reached a point where you stopped chasing someone you love, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally cared enough about yourself to stop bleeding for them? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your stories. It took 3 weeks for Dylan to notice the house was gone. Not gone in the physical sense, it still stood there, painted white, trimmed hedges, porch light glowing faintly at night. But when he pulled into the driveway one Saturday afternoon, the air felt different. Colder. Foreign. The for sale sign was gone. So was the red tulip pot his mother used to keep by the front step. And on the mailbox, a new nameplate, Henderson. He blinked, confused. For a moment, he thought he'd made a mistake, maybe this wasn't the right address. But then he saw it, the crack on the front walkway he'd tripped over when he was 8. No, this was his house. Or, it used to be. He got out of the car, heart pounding. His wedding ring glinted under the afternoon sun, a reminder of the life he'd built just miles away, the one that hadn't made space for the woman who raised him. He walked up to the porch, peered through the window. Inside, the walls were painted a pale gray instead of cream. The furniture was gone. No photos. No scent of cinnamon. No trace of the woman who had once made this place pulse with warmth. A stranger opened the door, a man in his 40s, polite but puzzled. "Can I help you?" Dylan stammered. Yeah, sorry. I grew up here." The man smiled softly. "Oh. Well, it's a beautiful place. We just moved in 2 weeks ago. The previous owner didn't leave much behind." "Previous owner?" Dylan repeated. "Do you know her name?" The man frowned, thinking. "Nora Whitfield, I think. The papers just said the house was sold as is. No forwarding address." The air seemed to drain from Dylan's chest. He managed a quiet thank you and stepped back. When he got into the car, his hands were shaking. He pulled out his phone, opened his messages. The last text from his mother was dated 6 weeks ago. It said, "Dinner Sunday? I made your favorite. No pressure. Just love." He'd never replied. He was busy. Or at least, that's what he told himself. Now, staring at that message, he felt his chest cave in. He called her number. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. And again. Each ring stretched longer than the last, echoing through his guilt. By the 5th call, his voice cracked. "Mom, it's me. I went to the house. It's gone. You're gone. Where are you?" He paused, swallowing hard. "Look, I know things got bad. I should have called. I should have told you. I just thought you'd hate me for marrying without." His voice broke. "Please, just call me back, okay? Please." But the line stayed dead. That night, Dylan sat in his car outside the house until the streetlights came on. He imagined her inside, cooking, humming to some old jazz record, the same way she did when he was little. He imagined walking in, apologizing, hugging her until words didn't matter anymore. But every time he blinked, the image disappeared. Reality was empty. When he finally drove home, Alana was waiting by the window, arms crossed. "Where were you?" she asked. "I went to Mom's," he said quietly. She frowned. "And?" It's gone. What do you mean, gone? She sold it. Moved out. No one knows where. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alana sighed, as if the news were an inconvenience rather than a heartbreak. Maybe that's for the best, she said. You both needed boundaries. Dylan turned toward her slowly. Boundaries? She was my mother, Alana. And she was suffocating you, Dylan. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, maybe. But at least she was there. Alana's face hardened. Are you saying this is my fault? He rubbed his temples. No. I'm saying maybe it's mine. He walked past her and went straight to the bedroom. The wedding photo on the nightstand caught his eye, the one his mother had never seen. He stared at it for a long time, then turned it face down. For the next few weeks, he called every number he could think of, her old church, her bridge group, the neighbors. No one knew where she went. Mrs. Alden, the woman across the street, was the only one who offered a clue. She left quietly, she said. No moving trucks, no goodbye. Just one day she was gone. Did she leave anything behind? He asked. Mrs. Alden hesitated. Only a note for you. I slipped it under the mat. Thought you'd find it. Dylan's breath caught. What note? I'm sorry, honey. Maybe it got lost in the rain. He felt the world tilt for a second. Even her last words, washed away. At night, he started dreaming about her. She wasn't angry. She was just there, sitting on the porch, humming softly, as if waiting for him to come home. Every time he reached for her, she faded. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, staring into the dark, feeling the kind of emptiness that doesn't go away when the sun rises. He stopped posting on social media. Stopped visiting Alana's family. Stopped smiling. He told himself it was temporary, that she'd call eventually, that mothers always forgive. But she didn't. And as the silence stretched into months, guilt started to taste like iron in his mouth. He began to realize the truth too late, that the house wasn't just a place. It was her last tether to him. Every wall, every photo, every scratch on the doorframe had been her way of holding on. He thought she was punishing him. But in truth, she was grieving him while he was still alive. One afternoon, Alana found him sitting in the car again, outside the house that no longer belonged to them. Dylan, you can't keep doing this, she said, voice soft but impatient. He didn't look at her. I just keep thinking she'll pull up. That she'll see me here and stop. She's not coming back, Alana said. You need to accept that. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the front door. I know, he whispered. But I don't know how. She sighed and got back into the car, slamming the door. Dylan stayed there another hour. The sun began to set, and for a moment, he imagined he saw her silhouette in the upstairs window, just a flicker of movement, like a ghost trapped between worlds. He blinked. It was gone. That night, as he lay awake beside his sleeping wife, he realized something devastating. He had everything he thought he wanted. And none of what truly mattered. He thought I was punishing him. But in truth, I was grieving him while he was still alive. And that's when the regret began, not his, but mine. Would you have done the same if your child shut you out of their life? Or would you have waited, no matter how long it took? Tell me what your heart says, right or wrong, in the comments. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in Nora Pierce's small apartment. She'd gotten used to the silence now, the kind that stretched between walls, heavy and sacred, as though it carried all the words she never said. The place was modest, a single-bedroom unit above an antique shop on Maple Avenue. The paint on the windowsills was chipped, and the scent of old wood floated through the floorboards. She'd filled the space with second-hand furniture and a few framed photographs, one of her late husband, Martin, and one of Dylan as a child, grinning at the camera, his cheeks covered in chocolate ice cream. Every morning, Nora woke up before sunrise. She made coffee, always enough for two out of habit, and sat by the window overlooking the street. Cars passed. Strangers hurried to work. Somewhere below, wind chimes sang faintly from the store's porch. Her life had become simple. Too simple. Sometimes she told herself she liked it this way, no expectations, no disappointments. But deep down, she knew the truth, she hadn't found peace. She had only found distance. You don't heal by running, she whispered to her reflection in the window pane. You just get tired of running. Across town, Dylan stared at the sold sign on the front lawn of his childhood home. The house looked smaller than he remembered, but maybe that's because it no longer belonged to them. He stood there for a long while, hoping his mother might suddenly appear, maybe watering the garden or waving from the kitchen window like she used to. But there was nothing. The new owner, a man in his 40s wearing a baseball cap, walked out to collect the mail. "Excuse me," Dylan said hesitantly. "Do you know where the woman who used to live here went?" The man shook his head. "She sold fast. Didn't leave a forwarding address. Left the place spotless, though. Like she'd been planning to leave for a while." That line hit Dylan like a blow. He looked past the man, at the windows, his old bedroom, his mom's garden. Gone. All of it. That night, he drove aimlessly around town. He ended up parked near the lake where his mother used to take him fishing on Sundays. He remembered how she'd cheer when he caught a fish the size of his palm, clapping like he'd won a trophy. He remembered her laugh. He hadn't realized how much he missed that sound until now. "What did I do?" he whispered to himself. "Why didn't I call her sooner?" He picked up his phone and scrolled through old texts. "Mom, dinner tonight?" "I made your favorite." Dylan, no reply. "Mom, you okay, sweetheart?" Dylan, no reply. Now, he typed. "Mom. I'm sorry. Please talk to me." He stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. He didn't deserve a reply. Over the next few weeks, Dylan became a quiet detective in his own mother's story. He visited every place she'd ever loved. First stop, the community library. The staff remembered her instantly. "Oh, Mrs. Pierce," said one of the older librarians, adjusting her glasses. "She resigned a while back. Left behind this." She handed Dylan a small cardboard box labeled N. Pierce. Inside were old bookmarks, a coffee mug with faded lipstick stains, and a folded note written in his mother's familiar looping handwriting. "Sometimes love means stepping away before your presence becomes a burden." Dylan sat on the library bench, holding the note until his fingers trembled. He drove to her church next. Mrs. Langford, the choir leader, gasped when she saw him. "My goodness, Dylan. You look just like your father." "Do you know where my mom is?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. Mrs. Langford sighed. "She used to come here every week. Always brought flowers for the altar. But then one Sunday, she stopped showing up. No one knew why. She didn't even say goodbye." He thanked her, forcing a smile, then walked outside. The autumn wind bit through his jacket as the church bells began to ring, slow and mournful. She left the way she lived, he thought. Quietly. Without asking for anything in return. Days later, Dylan returned to the old neighborhood again, not because he hoped to see her, but because he couldn't let go. The new owners had torn down the oak tree in their backyard. The one where he and his mother had built the treehouse together when he was 8. He still remembered her voice that day, laughing as she steadied the ladder. "If you fall, I'll always be here to catch you." Now the tree was gone. The yard felt smaller. Empty. He sat in his car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. For the first time in his adult life, Dylan cried, not because of loss, but because of realization. He finally understood what she'd been trying to protect all along, not herself, but him. Meanwhile, in her quiet apartment, Nora was writing again. Every night before bed, she sat by the small wooden desk near her window and poured her thoughts onto paper, letters to Dylan she never mailed. I sold the house because every corner whispered your name. I couldn't walk through it without feeling the weight of what I'd lost. I'm sorry for the words I said that night. I didn't mean to push you away. I only wanted to hold on to you a little longer. If love is a home, then maybe I've been locked outside of it for a while now. She folded each letter and kept them in a shoebox under her bed. Dozens of them, all addressed, none sent. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Dylan sat at his laptop searching one last time. He typed Nora Pierce into every search bar, every People Finder site he could find. And then, a small lead. A payment record from months ago under a new address. Maple Avenue. He froze, heart pounding. He read the address twice, 3 times. The next morning, Dylan drove to Maple Avenue. The air smelled like rain and old leaves. He parked across the street from the antique shop, scanning the building above it. A curtain moved on the second floor. A faint light flickered inside. He almost stepped out, almost called her name, but then his phone buzzed. It was Alana. Dylan, please. Don't do this to yourself. If she wanted you in her life, she wouldn't have disappeared. He hesitated. Looked up again at the window. For a moment, he thought he saw her silhouette, or maybe it was his imagination. Then the light went out. And just like that, he turned the key and drove away. That same night, inside the apartment above the antique shop, Nora stood by her window, clutching her mug of tea. She looked down at the street below, a car idling for a few seconds before pulling away. A strange feeling washed over her. Her chest tightened. Dylan, she whispered softly, as though his name might reach him through the wind. She didn't know how close they had just come. He was searching for forgiveness, and I was hiding from it. Maybe that's the cruelest thing about love, how it keeps you tethered to someone's soul, even when both of you have already let go. The next morning, Dylan's phone buzzed again, this time, from an unknown number. A text appeared. This is Mrs. Langford. I think I found your mother's address. He froze, staring at the message. His hands began to shake. He was one step away. I found it by accident. The envelope was wedged between 2 old recipe books, its edges yellowed, my handwriting faint but unmistakable, for Dylan. My chest tightened the moment I touched it. The paper felt fragile, like a secret that had waited too long to be heard. I sat on the edge of my bed, turning it over in my hands. There was no stamp, no address. I had meant to leave it for him the day I moved out of the house, but in the storm of that morning, the papers, the boxes, the tears, I must have left it behind. The irony stung. The one thing I meant to leave him, I whispered, and it never reached him. I hesitated before opening it. The glue had long since dried, so it slipped open easily, revealing a single page in my own cursive, uneven, emotional, unfiltered. My sweet boy. If you are reading this, it means I have finally done the hardest thing a mother can do, let go. Not because I stopped loving you, but because love can't survive where it's smothered. You are my heart, Dylan, but I've realized I've been holding you too tightly, trying to protect you from a world you were born to face. Maybe that's why you drifted, not because you stopped needing me, but because I forgot how to need less. I will always be your mother, but I must stop being your shadow. If you ever look for me, know that I never truly left. I'm somewhere between the light and the memories, waiting for the day you'll forgive me for loving you the only way I knew how. Mom. By the time I finished reading, the tears had blurred the ink. I pressed the paper against my chest, as though I could still feel his heartbeat through it. If only you'd found this, Dylan, I whispered. Maybe things wouldn't have broken the way they did. I folded it gently and placed it inside my journal, the one I had started after I moved. That journal had become my confessional, my only audience. Every page carried the weight of words I could never say aloud. The first page of the journal had a photo taped to it, Dylan at 5 years old, sitting on Martin's shoulders, both of them laughing at something behind the camera. That was before the world got complicated. Before grief hardened into fear. Every night, I wrote to him as though he might one day read it. Dear Dylan, I hope you're happy. I hope Alana loves you the way you deserve. I hope you forgive me for the night I broke what we built. I only ever wanted to keep you safe. Sometimes, my pen trembled so hard I could barely finish a sentence. Other times, I found myself smiling through tears, remembering the little moments, his first bicycle crash, his graduation, the time he called me at midnight just to ask how to get red wine out of a shirt. I didn't realize how much I missed those calls until the silence became louder than my thoughts. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found the keychain he made me in 3rd grade, a crooked clay heart with the words "Best Mom Ever" scratched into the surface. The paint had chipped, but the sentiment hadn't. It reminded me that love, no matter how damaged, never disappears, it just changes shape. That night, I placed the keychain beside the old envelope and whispered to the empty room. You are my reason for everything, Dylan. Even my mistakes. Meanwhile, miles away, Dylan was driving through a small town off the interstate when his phone buzzed. It was the message from Mrs. Langford, his old choir teacher. I think I found your mother's forwarding address. He pulled over, heart hammering. The address was in handwriting that slanted like hers, Maple Avenue, apartment 2B, above an antique shop. He whispered her name under his breath, Mom, as if saying it could somehow summon her. The world suddenly felt smaller, like fate had folded time just to bring him back to her door. He started the engine again, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. He didn't know what he'd say when he saw her, or whether she'd even want to see him. But he knew he couldn't live with silence anymore. No more running, he muttered. Not from her. Not from this. Back in her apartment, Nora felt uneasy all evening. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the wind rattling the window panes, or the faint scent of rain drifting in. Something in the air felt charged. She closed her journal after writing her latest entry. If we are meant to find each other again, it will not be because of guilt, but because love has finally learned how to speak. She set down her pen, unaware that, at that exact moment, her son was less than 10 miles away, driving through the same rainstorm, following the same road that once led him home. By nightfall, Dylan reached Maple Avenue. Streetlights reflected in puddles along the road. He parked across from the antique shop and looked up at the second-floor window. A faint glow flickered behind the curtains. He stepped out of the car, rain soaking his shoulders. But just as he crossed the street, the shop's door opened, and an old man came out to lock up. "Excuse me," Dylan called. "Does Nora Pierce still live here?" The man squinted through the rain. "Nora? She moved out last week, son. Said she needed somewhere quieter. Didn't say where." Dylan's breath caught. Do you have any idea where she went?" The man shook his head. "She left in a hurry. Sweet woman, though. Always bought those old music boxes we couldn't sell." Dylan stood there, the rain dripping from his hair, his heart sinking. He had found her, and lost her again. At that same moment, Nora sat on a bus headed out of town, her journal clutched tightly in her lap. She wasn't running away this time, she was searching for peace in the only way she knew, by moving forward. As the bus turned onto the highway, she looked out the window and whispered, "If he's meant to find me, he will." Outside, the headlights of a silver car crossed paths with the bus, for just a second. Neither of them realized who was on the other side of the glass. Some letters never reach their destination. But sometimes, I think the heart still receives them, carried by the ache of everything left unsaid. She placed her head against the cool window, watching raindrops slide down like tiny trails of memory. And somewhere in the distance, Dylan drove into the same storm, chasing a mother who had never stopped loving him. The next morning, Dylan's phone buzzed again, an alert from the postal office, forwarding confirmation, package addressed to N. Pierce, delivery scheduled for tomorrow. He frowned. He hadn't sent her anything. He didn't know it yet, but fate was about to deliver the letter that never arrived, the one that would finally bring their stories back together. I wasn't expecting anyone that morning. The sky outside was still pale, that strange quiet before sunrise when even the city seems to hold its breath. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, journaling as I always did, when I heard the knock. It wasn't loud, just 3 gentle taps, but something in the rhythm made my pulse stop. My first thought was that I was imagining it. My second was that I wasn't ready for whoever was on the other side. When I opened the door, I didn't have to wonder anymore. He was standing there, Dylan. Older, thinner, eyes heavier than I remembered. The kind of tired that didn't come from sleepless nights, but from years of carrying unspoken words. For a moment, neither of us moved. The hallway light flickered above him, and the air between us felt like a wall. "Hi, Mom." His voice cracked on the word. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "Dylan." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Can I come in?" I nodded slowly, stepping aside. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. He looked around the small apartment, the thrifted furniture, the muted light filtering through lace curtains, the smell of coffee still lingering in the air. It was a far cry from the house he grew up in, from the warm, creaking floors and framed family photos that once lined the hallway. There was a time he would have teased me about this space. But now, his eyes only softened with something like grief. "You really left everything," he murmured. I swallowed hard. There wasn't anything left to stay for. He sat down slowly, as though the weight of the room itself might break him. I stayed standing. It was easier that way, easier to look down at him than to look at the memories sitting across from me. Finally, he said it, the question that had haunted both of us. "Why didn't you come to my wedding?" The words sliced through the air, clean and merciless. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Why didn't you invite me?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What?" My hands trembled slightly, but I didn't hide them. "You think I would have missed the happiest day of your life on purpose?" He shook his head, confused. I thought you didn't want to come. That you couldn't stand Alana." "Alana?" I let out a brittle laugh. "Alana didn't even give me the chance to try." He leaned forward. "Mom, that's not true." "Then why didn't I get an invitation?" "I sent one," he said, his voice rising in defense. "Alana and I both did. We mailed it weeks before the wedding. He stopped mid-sentence, frowning as if something had just clicked in his mind. "Wait," he whispered. "We sent it to the house. The Whitfield house." My heart sank. The realization hit us both at once, cold, sharp, cruel. The invitation had gone to the address I'd already sold. That meant it never reached me. And everything that followed, the silence, the anger, the heartbreak, had grown from a simple, tragic misunderstanding. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Dylan rubbed his temples, his voice breaking. "All this time, I thought you were punishing me. And I thought you'd erased me," I whispered. He looked up at me, eyes wet. "Mom, I swear, I wanted you there. I kept hoping you'd walk through the doors. I even told Alana, she'll come. She always shows up. But when you didn't, you thought I was done loving you." He nodded slowly. "And I guess I stopped believing you could forgive me for choosing someone else." The room swelled with the sound of unshed tears. I finally sat down across from him, the table between us feeling like the last wall left standing. Maybe this was never about forgiveness, I said quietly. Maybe it was about pride, yours and mine. You wanted freedom. I wanted control. And in the middle of all that wanting, we lost each other. Dylan's lip trembled. I never wanted to lose you, Mom. I reached across the table, hesitated for a second, and then touched his hand. It was cold. Shaking. Familiar. Do you remember, I began softly, the day you moved out? You promised you'd call every Sunday. I made your favorite casserole and waited by the phone. He smiled faintly, guilt flickering behind it. You always made too much food. And you always came home with empty containers, I said, forcing a laugh that broke halfway through. We both chuckled, not because it was funny, but because laughter was the only way to keep from falling apart. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. I missed you every day, Mom. Even when I was angry. I know, I said. So did I. For a few seconds, we just sat there, two people trying to find language for a love that had survived everything except silence. Finally, he asked the question I wasn't ready for. Why did you sell the house? I exhaled, the truth heavy on my tongue. Because it was full of ghosts, Dylan. Every corner reminded me of who you were and who I'd lost. I couldn't live there without feeling like I'd failed. He swallowed hard. It was my home too. I know. Then why didn't you tell me before you sold it? Because I thought you'd already moved on. The look on his face told me he finally understood how pain can twist even love into something unrecognizable. He reached into his pocket then, pulling out a small, folded piece of paper. I found this in one of your old boxes, he said. It was the letter, the one I had meant for him, the one that never reached its destination. I read it, he said softly. Every word. Tears welled in my eyes. Then you know. He nodded. You said you had to stop being my shadow. I did, I whispered. But I never stopped being your mother. He reached across the table again, and this time, our hands stayed together. For a while, we didn't need words. The silence felt different now, not empty, but sacred. He looked at me, voice trembling. I wish I could take back everything. The distance, the things I said, the wedding. Don't, I interrupted gently. It happened exactly how it needed to. He frowned. How can you say that? Because maybe this was fate's way of teaching us both how love can go wrong. He stared at me, his expression softening. And how it can still find its way back. I smiled, tired, but real. Maybe. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft, steady, almost forgiving. As he stood to leave, Dylan turned at the doorway. I'm coming back tomorrow. I want you to meet Alana again. The real her. No walls. I hesitated. My heart wanted to say yes, but my fear whispered otherwise. Still, I nodded. Tomorrow, then. He smiled faintly, relief washing over his face. Tomorrow. When the door closed behind him, I pressed my palm against it, whispering into the wood grain. Please, God. Let tomorrow actually come. But deep inside, a shadow stirred, that uneasy feeling that fate wasn't done teaching us yet. Maybe this was fate's way of teaching us both how love can go wrong. But as I watched the rain swallow his car down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that some lessons come with one final test. It had been 3 weeks since the day Dylan showed up at my door. 3 weeks of cautious messages, awkward phone calls, and long pauses where both of us tried, and failed, to fill the silence between us. So when he finally said, "Let's have lunch, Mom," I agreed. Not because I was ready, but because some part of me knew that waiting for ready would mean waiting forever. The cafe was small, tucked on the corner of Maple and Pine, the kind of place we used to stop by after his piano recitals. The same little blue awning. The same smell of cinnamon and old wood. When I walked in, Dylan was already there, sitting by the window. He looked up as I entered, that same boyish tilt of the head he'd had since he was 5. It hit me how much time had passed, and yet, some part of him was still my little boy with the scraped knees and wild dreams. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, standing up. "Hey, sweetheart." For a moment, that single word, sweetheart, bridged years of distance. We hugged. Not tightly. Just long enough to remember that we could. The waitress poured us coffee, and for a while, we just sat there, letting the hum of quiet conversations around us fill the space we couldn't yet. Then Dylan reached into his bag and placed something on the table, an old, worn photo album. The corners were frayed, the spine nearly broken. "I found this in one of the storage boxes," he said. "Thought maybe we could look through it, together." I hesitated before touching it. That album had lived through every season of our lives: birthdays, scraped knees, holidays, silent dinners after fights. The good and the bad were glued to those pages. He opened it carefully. There was the photo of his 7th birthday, frosting on his nose, his smile wide and free. Then one of me, kneeling beside him at his first school recital. My hand on his shoulder. His eyes shining. "Dad took that one," he said. I nodded, tracing the edge of the photo. Before everything changed. He glanced at me, unsure whether to continue. "You and Dad, do you ever talk?" I smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But it's different now. Peaceful, not painful." He nodded slowly, as if the idea of peace itself was foreign. After a while, I reached into my purse and pulled out something of my own, the letter. The one I had written years ago but never mailed. "I wanted you to have this," I said. His eyes widened slightly as I placed it on the table. "I read the old one," he said. "This isn't that one." He looked at the handwriting, my handwriting, trembling slightly at the edges. "When did you write this?" "Last month," I said. "After you came to see me. I guess I needed to tell you the rest." He hesitated, then unfolded it slowly. The cafe faded away as he read. I watched his eyes move line by line, his expression shifting from quiet sorrow to something deeper, understanding. When he finished, he looked up, voice trembling. "You said you forgive me." "I do. But you also said you still feel the ache." "Yes." He nodded, swallowing hard. "So it's not really over." "It's not supposed to be," I said softly. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Dylan. It's choosing to love despite remembering." For a while, we just sat there in silence, our hands resting near each other on the table but not quite touching. He finally said, "You know, I used to think forgiveness meant pretending the past never happened. Just hitting reset." "And now?" I asked. He sighed. "Now I think it's about learning to live with the cracks. Like, if you break a bowl and glue it back together, it'll never be the same. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the cracks are where the light gets in." I smiled, tears threatening but refusing to fall. "That's a beautiful way to see it." "Guess I got that from you," he said with a small grin. I laughed softly. "No, sweetheart. You found that on your own." For a brief, perfect moment, the air between us felt warm again. Not healed, but healing. When our food arrived, we both laughed awkwardly because neither of us had any appetite. He played with his fork. "Alana wanted to come today." I froze for a second. "Oh." "She thought it might be too soon," he said carefully. "But she wants to. When you're ready." I nodded. "Tell her I'd like that." "Truly." He smiled. "She'll be happy to hear it." We ate in silence for a few minutes, and I realized how strange it felt to share a meal with my son again. The clinking of cutlery, the warmth of coffee cups, the rhythm of normal life trying to make its way back in. It felt almost sacred. When we finished, Dylan took my hand. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "Thank you for asking." He hesitated before adding, "You know, I keep thinking about what you said, about forgiveness not being one moment." I tilted my head. "And? I think you're right. It's more like steps. And some days, I move forward. But other days, I still feel angry. Mostly at myself." I squeezed his hand. "Then take your time. The heart needs time to catch up with what the soul already knows." He smiled faintly, looking down. "You always have the right words. Only because I learned them the hard way." We both laughed softly, the kind of laugh that feels like an exhale after years of holding your breath. When it was time to go, he insisted on paying. Typical Dylan, stubborn, protective, still trying to prove something. As we stepped outside, the sunlight spilled across the sidewalk, painting everything gold. He turned to me, smiling, the kind of smile that used to melt me when he was small. "I'll call you tonight," he said. "I'll be here." He hugged me, this time tighter, longer, real. And then he walked away. I stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was losing him. I felt like I was finally letting him go, the right way. Back in my apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and replayed the afternoon over and over. Every word. Every smile. Every tiny pause that meant more than either of us said aloud. On the nightstand sat the old photo album he'd brought me, still open to that picture of his 7th birthday. Beside it, the letter he'd just read. I smiled faintly, brushing a tear off the corner of the page. "He left that day smiling," I whispered. But I could see the tears he didn't want me to notice. And somehow, I knew, those unshed tears weren't of guilt anymore. They were the kind that come when love starts learning how to breathe again. Still, deep in my chest, an unease lingered, a whisper I couldn't silence. Because sometimes, the heart senses what the mind refuses to believe. Peace can be the calm before the next heartbreak. He left that day smiling, but I could see the tears he didn't want me to notice. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I found myself praying he'd come back home safely that night. It had been almost a year since that lunch. The seasons had rolled past in quiet circles, spring to summer, summer to fall, each one softer than the last. Dylan and I spoke often now. Not every day, but enough to remind each other that love still lived, just in gentler form. That morning, I decided to drive back to my old street. The Whitfield house, our house, no longer belonged to us. New voices filled those walls now. Laughter from strangers' children, fresh flowers in the yard, a bright red mailbox that wasn't mine. Still, something in me needed to see it one last time. I parked a few houses away and walked slowly, my hands trembling against the chill. Each step felt like walking through memory, the crack in the sidewalk Dylan used to jump over, the mailbox he once painted blue because red was too boring, the tree where Martin had carved our initials the year we bought the place. Time had erased some things. But not everything. When I reached the fence, I pulled a small candle from my bag, white, simple, unscented. I lit it carefully, shielding the flame from the wind. Then I set it down by the fence post, the same spot where Dylan used to wait for the school bus. The candle flickered against the afternoon breeze. For a moment, I saw my reflection in its flame, older, quieter, softer. I whispered to the empty yard. Love doesn't die when trust is broken. It changes form, it becomes memory, prayer, hope. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Dylan. Not at Alana. Not even at myself. We had all been learning, in our own flawed, human ways, what love really meant. Love wasn't control. It wasn't sacrifice without boundaries. It was letting someone go and trusting that they'd find their way back, even if the path took years. As the wind brushed my face, I heard Martin's voice again, faint, distant, but clear as sunlight through leaves. Don't hold on too tight, Nora. Even love needs space to breathe. I smiled. After all this time, I finally understood what he meant. A car passed slowly down the street, and a little boy in the back seat waved at me through the window. I waved back. Maybe he'd grow up in that same house. Maybe he'd run through the same yard, climb the same trees, dream under the same roof. Life goes on. And that's the quiet mercy of it. I turned to leave, but before I did, I looked at the candle one last time, still burning steady, even as the daylight dimmed. That's for you, Dylan, I whispered. So you'll always know, no matter the distance, there's a light waiting when you need it. He's older now. A husband. A father. The kind of man who carries both love and regret like quiet shadows behind his eyes. It's a rainy evening. The power flickers out for a moment, and in the dimness, he walks to a shelf where a candle sits, white, simple, unscented. He lights it carefully. Alana watches from the doorway. He smiles faintly, lost in thought. For Mom, he says. She used to light one whenever she wanted to say something words couldn't. The flame dances softly, reflecting in his eyes, and in that moment, I'd like to think he finally understood. Some love never fades. It just changes its shape, from presence, to prayer, to peace. You know, people think love ends when someone walks away. But the truth is, sometimes love just grows quieter. It lives in the spaces between forgiveness and forgetting. It lives in the letters we never send, the candles we light, the memories we keep. Have you ever loved someone so much that you lost yourself in the process? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if you believe in second chances, if you believe that healing begins with truth, then don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Mae. Because here, every story reminds us, no matter how broken love feels, it still finds a way to shine.